Well, now to something else. South Australia has the cheapest real estate agent commissions in the country, according to online comparison site localagentfinder.com.au. But vendors mostly aren't focused on finding the lowest fee. Well, the CEO, Matt McCann, joins us now to tell us more about the findings. Matt, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, just firstly, so take us through the state-by-state comparison. South Australia with the cheapest commissions.
It was, Bridie. Good morning. I think the thing to remember before we talk about the individual states is probably this is the widest assessment of commission rates from real estate agents in probably about 3 or 4 years, and we see some really interesting findings. South Australia being the cheapest at 2%, sort of juxtaposed with a 3% cap-out rate in Tasmania as being the highest. So you see the differences between the states. Probably the interesting thing, or the thing we find the most about it, is that there's huge variation. We do see a wide range of commissions between states and even within individual areas. Perhaps New South Wales and Victoria are probably, as we'd expect, to be highly competitive markets, and they sit at about 2.05%, whereas Queensland at 2.61% and WA at 2.31% sit slightly above those. The national average is about 2.07%, but I think WA is a really interesting case because what it shows us is in a market where property values have been falling over a period of time, we're still seeing commission rates hold up at above that 2% rate. So that's been a really interesting finding of the survey.
Matt, it's Amanda here. Why do you think these commissions are as they are? What are they reflecting?
Well, I think two things. One is that commissions as a means of for a consumer to pick an agent are one measure, but actually what we find in our research is that commission is what I call a gating item. So it's something, if a commission rate is being quoted as too low or being quoted as very, very high, consumers will take an agent's view of the universe and say that's not someone I'm going to deal with. But if it fits within a range that people consider reasonable, there are other factors at play. And probably the biggest factor that's at play is the ability of the agent to be able to get the best outcome. And our research tells us this. And in looking at that, what we see is local market knowledge as being the next key factor, and ultimately experience. So how you've been able to deliver for consumers over time or vendors over time. So we think that commission rate actually isn't a major driver. It's an important gating item.
Now, I just wanted to ask too, because I mean, you might look at it and think, oh, there doesn't seem to be that much difference between 2% and 3%, but actually that is quite a lot, isn't it?
It is between the states, and so you'd think on a $500,000 sale of a house, we're talking about $5,000. So in Tasmania, you're paying $5,000 more than you're paying in South Australia. So the variation tends to be a bit more geography driven necessarily than as specifically as the differences between areas as well.
Matt, looking at the vendors using your site, are they selecting the cheapest commission? Are they going that option?
Well, no, they're not. I think, as I'm saying, I think it's a gating item. So if it's too high or it's too low, then I think consumers are saying that's not someone who I want in the subset of the agents I ultimately sit down with and shortlist. What I do want to know, I definitely want to know, are they going to get me the best outcome? Do they have the right local knowledge? Do they have the right experience in selling properties in my area, so that I can see that ultimately I'm putting the sale of my property in the right hands of an agent? And ultimately, I think it comes down to, if you've got an agent who's going to get you $50,000 or $100,000 more on the value of your property, the commission rate that you're going to pay incrementally isn't so great. And so it really does focus on those quality factors around an agent rather than necessarily just commission rate. We know it's important, but it's not at the top of the list for vendors.
Just another quick one on commissions, because you can obviously negotiate a fixed rate or a tiered percentage commission model. What were your findings more popular, or what are vendors are going for? What do they prefer?
So across our platform, we give agents, when they're proposing their commission rates to be put to consumers who are comparing agents, we give them the option to be able to have either a fixed commission rate or a variable. Ultimately, we see that split being fairly even. It's not really one or the other, but we do find as the value of the property goes up that comes through the platform, we do see that change a little, so that variable pricing, so as the value goes up, you do see that commission structure slightly more popular than fixed.
What are the numbers, Matt? How many homeowners and also vendors are signing up to this site?
So in terms of homeowners, in the last 12 months we've had 65,000 what we call registrations. So that's a property owner coming through, identifying the property that they're interested in selling, the features of the property, and then some understanding of who the vendor is and their relationship to the property. And so with that, what we've been able to do at 65,000 is a really high number in the last 12 months. So we're seeing a shift in consumer behaviour here, which I think is critical in terms of what's going to happen in the future. It's a good indication that people are now wanting to go and find out information about agents in the way they do with many other of the comparison services that are out there today for other things like insurances, utilities and other household style products. So that consumer shift is driving large numbers of people to come and register their properties. And what we do know from our research is that of those that come through the platform, about 2/3 will sell that property within the subsequent 12 months from being on the service. And so it's a high pool of quality vendors that come through a platform like ours at Local Agent Finder.
I just want to ask you too about the number of agents signing up as well and taking part in the site, because I think you recently put out some information that another 1,200 agents had joined the platform in the year to date. But I mean, there have been agents who are critical of the online comparison site model, and they say that, look, it's something that really just uses computer programs to collect data. It doesn't really do due diligence for vendors, and also too saying that, you know, then go on and collect commission perhaps from agents that they could have perhaps found anyway, leads that they could have followed up anyway. What's your answer to agents who are sceptical about this sort of disruptive technology?
Well, look, I think there's probably three things at play here. One is that consumers are marching with their feet. We're seeing very substantial numbers of people who are going to transact their property coming onto these sites, and largely because they can't find the information they need to be able to compare agents as they do with other areas of their life. And so we're seeing that consumer shift. And that shift is critically important to recognise if you're an agent, because in the universe that you're living in, that consumer behaviour change will affect you. So probably the second piece here is that we've got a very large number of agents sitting on our service today, so over 5,000 engaged agents. But importantly, in the last since basically 1 January, we've had 1,253 new agents signing up. So that shift in recognising that consumers are moving to a different platform to get the start of their process to pick an agent moving is what's driving these agents back in. And I'd say to you probably the third thing is that when something changes in the way that people are doing things, there are those that will adopt it and there are those that will take a little bit of a time to understand it. And our job really is to educate agents to say these are high quality leads that are coming through the platform. They're giving the consumers the information to shortlist the right group of agents, and we really think that helping agents put their digital profile out there in a way that gives the consumer real confidence that they're going to get the best result with that agent means it's a great pool and a great source of marketing for agents as well. So what we're finding is the numbers are telling the tale in a sense. That number of over 1,200 agents joining this year onto our platform means that there's a broad-based acceptance that agent recommendations that come from platforms like ours are going to be the way of the future, and lots of agents are benefiting from it. We've got some agents who would get 20 to 30% of their transaction coming through our platform now, and we would see the growth rates we're seeing in interest from consumers will drive that further and further.
Matt, how does it work? I had a bit of a sticky beak yesterday and signed up. But as an agent, do they pay a base fee, and is it free for vendors to use as well?
Yeah, so the costs, vendors don't pay a fee to us for using the service, so they come in and go through the service, but the agent will pay us a fee. So when we find a vendor for an agent, there's a flat fee of 0.375% of the property value that the agent pays to us for doing that. Now, I think the key bit to remember for us is that equates to about 15 to 20% of commission, is that when we look at alternative forms of prospecting and compare the cost of acquisition in those forms of prospecting versus using comparison sites and the time and effort that's saved by not having to go out and cold call and letterbox drop and door knock, we find some much more efficient use of agent time and effort. And we're seeing that feedback now come back from our agent network. They're telling us that if they can get onto a vendor very quickly when a lead lead comes off a platform, they're very likely to end up talking to that vendor in their lounge room, talking about how they might be able to get the best outcome, and ultimately then listing that property and getting that sale. So the difficulty, I think, in one of the things that the industry has had to think about differently with platforms like ours has been that the lead is a different type of lead. The response times are absolutely critical here, because you're talking about someone who's come from a digital universe. They've come through a digital experience, and in a digital universe you're expecting a very fast response time. So we say to lots of agents that come through, if you get a lead from us, the window is 20 to 30 minutes. You've got to get onto that lead really quickly. You've got to make sure that you're giving yourself the best chance to be the person that they invite into their lounge room to talk about the sale of their property.
Matt, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time today. Matt McCann there, CEO of localagentfinder.com.au. Coming up after the break, we're going to be finding out who's been moving and grooving in celebrity land with Amanda Myler.